Good evening to everyone, and welcome to the Jewish Genealogical Society of Montreal monthly lecture meeting. I'm wearing two hats tonight as the president of the Jewish Genealogical Society of Montreal and as the speaker, executive director of JRI-Poland. One of the wonderful things about wearing those two hats is that I'm able to talk to people in my local community about what means so much to me in the world of Jewish family history. And I can tell you that that kind of dialogue that we've had over the years has been so encouraging for me, and I hope for my colleagues. And it's an illustration why being a member of an IAJGS society can be so important to developing your own family history. Something I recommend to everybody. Under today's circumstances, of course, it's not as easy as it used to be, but you can participate in Zoom meetings. And our society, the JGS of Montreal, has been blessed that with our workshops on the first Sunday of every month, we've had former Montrealers and people related to Montrealers all over the world join us for our Sunday morning family tree workshops. So if you've got ties to Montreal, please do get in touch with us and join us for our workshops. Before I show the video of the presentation that we made at the IAJGS conference on the Next Generation website and data management system, a few things I want to tell you about. The JRI-Poland team works nonstop. We have 7 professionals doing data entry for us. We have many, many volunteers all over the world doing data entries for us. Our NextGen team, a remarkable group of men and women, have been very actively involved in developing all sorts of background and source information for the NextGen website. But along the way, there are a couple of things that I should tell you. One is we enjoy a great relationship with JewishGen. As most of you will know, JewishGen is the home of Jewish genealogy on the internet. JRI-Poland, being an independent organization, has a
Stanley, we never introduced you.
Okay. I've been told I haven't been introduced. I introduced myself, but we'll let Vicki introduce me before we run the video. How's that, Vicki?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Look, I know for most of you watching this evening, Stanley Diamond needs no introduction, but officially, here's a very brief summary of Stanley's achievements. Stanley Diamond is the founding president of the Jewish Genealogical Society of Montreal and founder and executive director of the award-winning Jewish Records Indexing Poland, which he's about to talk about. He's also a founding member of the board of the International Institute of Jewish Genealogy in Jerusalem and a co-founder and member of the executive of the recently launched project Documentation of Jewish Records Worldwide. Stanley received the 2002 Lifetime Achievement Award from the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies, and in 2018, he was awarded the Meritorious Service Medal of Canada for his leadership in founding and leading JRI-Poland. Stanley's a graduate of McGill University, and he received his MBA from Harvard University. We're lucky to have him, and we're happy to share him with you tonight. And if any questions occur to you during Stanley's presentation or comments, please enter them in the chat box, either to the right or below the YouTube video screen, and we'll try to get to them after Stanley has finished his presentation. Okay, Stanley, back to you. You can do it now.
Thank you, Vicky. So I was talking about the relationship of JRI Poland to Jewish Gen. As most people will know, we allow Jewish Gen to display our data on their website and their database system. And this relationship is good for both organizations, and we continue to benefit on every scale. Another thing I want to mention is sometimes there's confusion as to JRI Poland or Jewish Gen. We are independent and our fundraising is independent, and the fundraising goes to developing data for your town, for all towns. So just keep that in mind in terms of the relationship going forward. Another thing I want to mention is when I talked about the volunteers and the professionals who are doing data entry, obviously the professionals are paid, and that's part of our fundraising program. A lot of data is being developed and has been developed over the last 6 months to a year. And we're hoping to incorporate all that new data or much of it in our new website when it is launched. Just as an example of some of the things that we have done recently, the Benjamin and Sosnowiec books of residence, and we're talking a total of more than 100,000 entries in those two data sets alone. We've been working on Bilsko, the, the German records of Bilsko in Upper Silesia. We have been just in the last 3 days, we haven't posted it online, but I'm pleased to tell those of you who have an interest in Łódź, in Lodge if you want to call it, but we now have the indices from the 1936 to 1939 marriages and deaths of Lodge. 20,000 additional entries with 7,000 different surnames. So if your family lived in Lodge, write to Lodge Records at JRI-Poland.org, and you can find out about what records there may be for your family. If you go online on the JRI Poland website and you look at the surname list for Lodge, you will see a list of all those surnames. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn on the video and show you the story of the next generation website and data management system. And I'm pleased to have shared the podium with our product manager for the new system, Brian Langer, who you'll meet tonight if you haven't met him before.
So welcome to session 1408, titled Jewish Record Indexing Poland, 25 years and the next 25. Our speakers are Executive Director of JRI Poland, Stanley Diamond, and JRI Poland Board Member, Brian Langer. My name is Hadassah Lipsius, and I am the session manager for this session.
Good afternoon and good evening from Montreal, the hockey capital of the world. And special greetings to our friends down under for being awake in the wee hours of the morning to join us. I'm delighted to be sharing the podium today with Brian Langer, board member and Next Generation product manager. And Brian and I are also pleased to be joined by fellow board member Hadassah Lipsius, who is moderating our Q&A today. Just a few hours ago, a question was asked following Arthur Kurzweil and Sally Ann Sachs' presentation on the change in Jewish genealogy that nicely sets up this presentation. The viewer asked, "What do you see for the future of Jewish genealogy?" Well, today we will answer that question as it relates to Jewish records indexing Poland. While our presentation will touch on our past, our focus will be on the present and plans for the future. In December, just 4 months away, we will be unveiling our new website, and today we will be giving you a sneak peek at what is coming soon. I'm also delighted to start the annual JRI-Poland presentation with a shout out to our hardworking colleague, Robin Nygin. Chairing this first-time virtual conference was a huge challenge, and that Robin met with her usual indomitable spirit and determination. Robin was recently appointed JRI-Poland Assistant Director, and her presence in that role has already provided a vibrant new voice to our team. As a member of the executive committee, Robin has taken on several complex projects that aim to prepare our organization for upcoming evolution. And please take time to watch Robin's excellent talk, Discovering Hidden Treasures in the JRI-Poland database, which you can view in the on-demand presentations. I know I speak for my colleagues on the JRI-Poland Executive Committee, Judy Baston, Mark Halpern, and Michael Tobias, when I mention our pride in Robin's leadership. "2020 has been a tumultuous time for each one of us. Most, if not all of us, will have a story to share, how this point in history affected us personally, or how we spent the extra time we suddenly had and continue to have. Many have used this moment to act on the recent interest in genealogy, and others to get back to researching their family history that somehow had been put aside. Then there are those of us who continue to do what we've been doing all along, making a difference every day for our genealogical friends around the world, through sharing family information or continuing our mission to serve the genealogical community wherever it is. For the leadership of JRI-Poland, and particularly those of us who have been intensively involved in the development of the Next Generation website and data management system, 2020 has been a particularly action-packed year, and there are still almost 5 months to go. But just talking about JRI-Poland in the abstract is hardly enough. What is JRI-Poland? What is our true essence? What makes JRI-Poland unique among country-based genealogical organizations? What is our mission and the role that we see for our organization and the world of Jewish family history? Jewish Records Indexing Poland is a collective of global volunteers with a common goal, seeking out a shared history and safeguarding it forever. We believe that the details and records and the stories they tell about our ancestors must be accessible in a form that will remain available forever. To serve this mission, we continue to build the largest database of country-based vital and other records online. We are able to do this because of the commitment and support of hundreds of volunteers and donors. We're also fortunate for generations of town authorities and state archivists in Poland who for more than 200 years have diligently preserved the treasures that record our family history. By contributing to our mission, whether as a volunteer, a partner, or donor, you join us in honoring the memory of our ancestors. I'd like to look back for a minute to where it all began. After spending a week at the Family History Library in Salt Lake City in November 1994, cranking the wheel, reading microfilms of Jewish records of Polish towns, I quickly realized that there had to be a better way. So in December 1994, a cooperative project to index those records was a germ of an idea I shared with 14 genealogists I'd met at conferences in the first few years of my journey. We are all blessed that Michael Tobias and Steve Zedek were inspired by that letter, which had naively suggested the sharing of floppy disks, and which became the foundation on which JRI-Poland was built. What we have achieved since then far exceeds what was imagined possible in 1995. That's why, irrespective of the theme of the annual JRI-Poland conference presentation, I've always made it a point to recognize those two colleagues who were instrumental in bringing JRI-Poland to life and without whose expertise, none of us would be here today. In October 1995, Michael Richmond and I received permission to index the post-1863 records of Ostrów Mazowiecka in the Polish State Archives. They were the records I needed for research into my family's genetic trait. 4 months later, we received a nod from Jerzy Skowronek, the director of the Polish State Archives, to continue the experiment with a few nearby towns. 1 year later, in the Polish embassy in Paris, at the time of the 1997 conference, Michael Tobias and I signed our first agreement with the PSA, opening the door to index the records for all towns in Poland. Now JRI-Poland can proudly quell about having more than 6.2 million records online and about 500,000 more in the pipeline. This was only possible through the dedication of our leadership, the passion of our volunteers, and the generosity of the worldwide genealogical community. Over the years, we have raised $2.5 million. And as remarkable as it may seem, more than 90% has been devoted to creation of data. We have recognized our responsibilities to our generous supporters and implemented stringent controls along the way. I could write chapters, even a book, about our 25-year journey and the ways in which our database grew. I could even mention the hundreds of dedicated volunteers who played an important part of our story. Those who are sadly no longer with us, like Adam Richter, who, in spite of his incurable cancer, continued to extract the books of residence of Mizrazic Podlaski until almost his dying day. However, not to minimize their history, today the focus of the annual presentation is on the future. It will be on the years ahead and where the JRI-Poland dream will take our leadership, the numerous researchers who use our data every day, and the countless who will discover JRI-Poland in the years to come. By 2045, just another 25 years from now, it will be 100 years since World War II ended, and the year when Jewish birth records of Poland will no longer be protected by Polish laws. In 2045, JRI-Poland will celebrate 50 years and the full extraction of virtually all vital records, books of residence, and a variety of other sources. Judging by how much has been accomplished since 1995, I have no doubt about our future. But how do we expect to get there? First, by expanding our volunteer circle and attracting a younger generation to join our leadership. By looking inward at all areas of our organization and continue to refine the ingredients needed to support our growth. And through the use of technology to create solutions for every need as we evolve. And to understand and appreciate where we are going, let's look at how we've been preparing for this pivotal moment in our monumental journey. Now it's 2020. From the seeds planted 25 years ago, the JRI-Poland family tree has nearly 200 active volunteers from more than a dozen countries. I wish I had an extra hour to tell the inspirational story of every dedicated volunteer in each of the cities marked on this map. From Max Wald in Melbourne, Peggy Neiman in St. Louis, Fred Frankel in Munich, to Judy Golan in Israel, and Patrick Atlas in Paris, Amit Ganadik in Singapore, to Greta Davis in Sydney, and on and on. We are truly thriving online. While time differences make personal communications difficult, We are blessed that all of us sharing roots in Poland have found ways to collaborate from wherever our paths have taken our families. As more people become comfortable with working remotely, we see the power of online collaboration. It has given us almost irreplaceable tools for discussion, education, and learning, along with the very important ability to demonstrate techniques to our volunteers and you, our researchers. And we also recognize that online collaboration will be invaluable in helping us best utilize our leadership assets. And that certainly extends to members of our current and new committees. They will be able to communicate and operate in ways that take full advantage of the background and experience that each brings to JRI Poland. Committees are vital to our success, and going forward, we see expanded roles for each one to cover many aspects of operation. There's data location and acquisition, membership development, public relations, and record extraction standards. Since many of our volunteers have used Skype for more than a decade, the new video chat culture has been a natural fit for our team as we work together across the globe. Earlier this year, most of the Next Generation committee members met on Zoom, and I saw some of their faces for the first time. It made me realize with great satisfaction that a few are young enough to be my grandchildren, and they too have also become passionate genealogists and members of our team. It also dawned on me that we are the ones planting the fruit tree from which our future generations will feast, far easier than we've ever had it. And to push the analogy even further, when we started, it was like using a ladder and a basket to pick one apple at a time. Now there are modern machines devouring bushels. NextGen is our way to realize the fruits of our efforts. You may think we've been holding the spot in the bottom right corner, and originally we were going to have a goblet for Elijah, but now, Moses, thank you for joining. And since I have no commandments to pass along, I'm now handing the microphone to Brian. He will explain how the Next Generation project is not simply an effort to launch a new website, but is a systematic approach to reorganizing JRI Poland for growth in the next century.
Thanks so much, Stanley. Thank you to our executive committee, all of our board members, our area coordinators, our town leaders. They've all accepted a heavier load to make this dream a reality, and I couldn't be prouder. I want to thank the entire Next Generation Committee. Every volunteer who's participated in this project has been integral to its success, to getting us to this point. And above and all, we appreciate and thank the researchers who have been generously supporting NextGen with their donations, and our friends who recognize the importance of our mission with their major gifts. You know, it's so nice to see everyone here. And a little about myself, I'm joining here from Woodland Hills near Los Angeles. And I'm so pleased that this is my first conference in a non-traditional way, but I'm here. And the virtual world has allowed me that. And I'm just so pleased, happy from the bottom of my heart to be able to share all of this with you today. It's been such a passion over the years, and I can't express how much it means to me to have you as an audience, that people want to hear what's happening at JRI-Poland. Many researchers have a letter or maybe a story or some heirloom that represents the questions they have about their ancestry. And they thought, you know, perhaps these questions they have would never be answered. I spent so many afternoons after grade school at my grandparents' house, and Wheel of Fortune, my grandmother's favorite, was always playing on their console TV. But on the top of the TV was this photograph of my boobie's parents. It was so intriguing, as you can imagine, for someone young. to see this older photo, and it was the only photo I'd ever seen of any of my ancestors. My grandparents rarely spoke to me about their time in Poland. And so for many years growing up, really until 9 years ago, when I began my research, I really felt my history was lost. We come from a small family. All the records are lost. We've all heard it. But knowing my roots were in Poland, I started climbing a family tree, and I climbed it blindly at first, but quickly I was understanding that JRI-Poland could be such an invaluable guide for me, hold my hand and show me the way. Well, very quickly I became a town leader, and I could see firsthand through the relationships built as town leader with researchers that the same feelings I had resonated with pretty much everyone I spoke to. And since I grew up in a home that recognized the importance of giving back, I'm just so honored to be a part of this. And I'm sure that through the NextGen project, we can inspire the next generation of researchers to give back as well. JRI-Poland made a momentous decision when it embarked on the NextGen proposal. During this process, we've turned over every rock. We've really looked in every corner, and we've examined our past procedures, our performance, our methods, and we were always at the same time remembering what's worked for us, what's made us as JRI-Poland unique among country-based projects. We documented the challenges we faced, and in the process, we also discovered needs we didn't even know we had. The new system that's coming forward utilizes the most up-to-date platforms to enable us to continue to add features so we can improve the JRI-Poland experience, not only this year, but in the years to come. But I want to stress that NextGen is not only a technology project, it's our commitment to improve JRI-Poland in every facet so that we can take full advantage of the technology that we implement. So as we continue to learn, and as a research community, you share your thoughts and your wish list, we will continue to evolve. So why do I put this up here? Well, from what I understand, I have 2 kids, so I haven't had free time, but many people have been using their free time these past few months for puzzles. And I started thinking, well, it's not so different than genealogical research, is it? It's a picture we put together, one piece at a time. And hopefully it becomes clear, and hopefully also we're not missing pieces. But that's the nature of a puzzle. So I'd like to use this analogy, and I'd like to point to the pieces of the next generation puzzle. The goal of the project has always been to improve JRI-Poland in all aspects for all users. First, by reducing impact on our volunteers, and at the same time, providing a better experience for the researcher. There's so much work to be done, so we need to do it in an efficient manner and streamline our processes. Whether managing content for the website or contributing together as volunteers to the database, the future is online collaboration. So looking at the puzzle pieces in orange, content management and restructured database, I'd like you now to notice, as the next puzzle pieces come in, that the elements here are directly beneficial for researchers, in that content management allows us to create a refocused website, and that the restructured database allows a completely reinvented search experience. And together, these most high-level goals address the needs of volunteers and researchers. They suit our mission, preserving our history together. Welcome to the new look of JRI-Poland. and a modern approach to the way we research. I I wish we were in person together so I could see what I hope are some smiles out there at something so new and at such an important moment for us. We'd like you to think of the new website as an evolving entity that will continue to grow with us, as I've said. We're committing to learning from each release, adapting, and then expanding. As you'll see shortly, this is not simply our current website with a new look. It's a complete, I stress complete, ground up rebuild. The next handful of slides are going to be a little bit technical, but I promise we won't have a test for you after, so don't worry too much. You may not realize how many documents, spreadsheets, and other files we currently must use to answer inquiries. It's quite laborious. So to make this process quicker and less cumbersome, we set out to integrate all of our most important elements in a single interconnected way through a relational database. As part of NextGen, we will now be tying together records, towns, sources, projects, and most importantly, for the first time, our users. These formerly disparate elements are being collected and reorganized, enabling infinite opportunities for examining and exploring our resources. Let's chat for a moment about the way we plan to restructure record data. In this 1904 birth record, all fields have equal weight. So how can we group and rearrange the genealogical information for the utmost clarity? Well, in this record, there's the record base information. There's information about the person of this record, in this case, a newborn. Information about the father, and of course, the mother. So basically, we've pulled our records apart and we're putting them back together, sorting the information by base record information, such as Vishkov, 1904, births, Act 70. It's the container. It is the record at the highest level. And then you'll see that we begin to see the information as belonging to individuals, the genealogical information collected and put to person types to give additional dimension and clarity. Our aim is for the researcher to view the extracted record information as it was originally intended, as a story of an event. Like my journey, like many of your journeys, we all desire to connect the records left by our ancestors to a story, to a photograph, to anything that's been passed down to us from our parents and grandparents. We know that records are more than just collections of data. So important to remember that. Each record represents a moment, a person, and a story. It could be the celebration of new life with the birth of a baby, or two families becoming one through marriage, or the sadness of the death in a family. But these are our families. We've seen records with family units of up to 10 people documented. Organizing these individuals and the related information is so vital to our research. The new system gives us the ability to attribute each piece of information in the record to a specific individual. To have a place for every piece of information, we examine the person types and the details that could be recorded each in the fields. This slide shows an overview for some of the options for vital records. And I'm going to show you three categories of people relative to the record. Group one is the person of record, which I hinted at before. Newborn, a bride and a groom, or a decedent. This is for vital records. Then we see another grouping of people in record, and that is the family members related to the person of the record. These could include parents, children, siblings, aunts, uncles, grandparents, on and on. This is a partial list. And then the third group would be others listed. They're listed in official capacity. Witnesses, rabbis, moils, even tutors. These are people that were there at the moment of this event. They're not just names written down. They're people that stood with our ancestors and had a part in this moment. The new relational database allows us to use any of the fields. This is a partial list. Any of the fields available with each of the people, with each person type, so that every piece of information extracted has a place. Ultimately, the goal is to minimize and hopefully eliminate the uncertainty in the flow of record information from the original source to the researcher. As always, to this, JRI-Poland continues as the resources are available to improve the record quality, the quality of the record data. So we were building a new website from scratch, and in doing so, it requires both innovation and also a willingness to try things that seem impossible. And we started evaluating those parts of the experience that worked. And for all the things that worked well in the past, well, there's always things that simply could be improved in any process. We chose web developers with a background in collaborating with nonprofits. This was so important to us. And together we determined a new flow for the website. You all know there's an unending option. There's unending options on the internet. Which link do I click on? You know, it can be difficult to know what you should be looking at. Years ago, for focused research, and I stress the word focused, you would carefully choose your record sources, perhaps some maps and atlases, and all kinds of genealogical reference books to bring to your desk. Maybe geological if your family was a diamond. In some ways, we are bringing that experience back. And when you sit down to research at JRI-Poland's new website, you will see 3 corresponding tools, one for each. First, database search to examine your records in a completely new way. Town Finder to explore shtetls and understand record availability. And a knowledge base for all your learning needs consolidated into one place. Just because we have the benefits of technology to enhance our research doesn't mean the underlying needs aren't the same. So we work with the professionals. There we go, knowledge base, thanks for joining us. So we worked with the professionals to determine how to replicate that experience in the most productive way. And the part I've been waiting for, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a video is worth even more. So please grab your popcorn, your candy, silence your cell phone. I'm gonna sit back in my chair for a moment and enjoy. There will be some music. So if the volume is different than is pleased you for the previous parts of the talk, please adjust your volume. Or if you are a person who doesn't like music, just turn it off. And now, enjoy the world premiere, JRI-Poland for the Next Generation.
Thank you, Brian. Each time I see the next iteration of what we are developing, I become more excited. A year ago at the Cleveland conference, our presentation described the potential for using technology to revolutionize JRI-Poland for the next generation. Now, as the actual pieces come together like that puzzle, our vision is being realized, and soon we will all be able to benefit from the sophisticated management tools, the new knowledge base to improve our understanding, and explore the inspired and expanded search system. As Brian has demonstrated, the next generation website and data management development project will be a sea change for JRI Poland. I know that all researchers share our enthusiasm for the project and anticipation of exploring for themselves. That's why I'm pleased to mention again that the formal launch of the public website is slated for early December. More information on the rollout will be made in the coming months. We want to share with you as soon as we can possibly do that. JRI Poland will be introducing a registration and a login system. For the first time, we will have a means to promptly and efficiently convey the latest news to every researcher, even before the public learns of new data or reads important announcements. At the same time, we will be developing user profiles to make it possible to offer additional benefits to our dedicated researchers who choose to become full members of the JRI Poland family. To understand our concept of membership, I'd like to cite a mantra I preached in my business years. Our employees quickly recognized what I meant when I said, if the customer says jump, we say how high. JRI Poland has also adopted that philosophy when we emphasize that it is the research community we serve and the individual researcher who is asking us to deliver the goods that they need and want. But a researcher, like a customer, also has commitments. Becoming a JRI Poland member demonstrates that you too truly appreciate our efforts to build and continue building the largest online database of country-based specific Jewish records. Being a proud JRI Poland member is every researcher's way of giving back, not just to contribute to your town's records, but to help support the indirect costs of maintaining a never-growing organization serving you. Your annual membership will be used to offset administrative costs, and they have increased over the years, and to help fund critical projects such as NextGen. The details of membership will be released next month. We hope you will all join. We've talked about records. We've talked about technology. but it's personal stories that touch us deeply and inspire us each day. Dramatic stories of hidden children learning their identity is one way you may hear the most, but the one you may hear the most. But many of us have had our own DNA breakthroughs. That's why this unusual story is so important. JRI-Poland is not just a source of records for your family. DNA testing, really just in its infancy, has demonstrated the possibility that many of us may be related in some way, even discounting endogamy and multiple shared ancestry. Just in the past month, Michael Tobias dramatically demonstrated the impact of studying DNA results in tandem with JRI-Poland data. It was a test of what researchers may be able to accomplish themselves with this powerful combination. It started on July 10th with the DNA of one woman, a lady in England asking Michael for help in identifying her Jewish birth father, and not even mentioning an interest in finding family. No one could have possibly imagined where that email would take the unsuspecting woman. In the next 3 weeks, following the DNA trail and building family trees for each of the significant DNA hits, Michael was able to identify her ties to 4 half-siblings, all sharing the same father, but with 4 different mothers. To be certain of the connections between the DNA matches and the half-siblings, it was necessary for Michael to use our data to create family trees going back to the late 1700s. And should you be curious, only 2 of them knew of half-siblings. This was a vivid testimony to many possibilities of our data and how important our mission has been and will continue to be. Each of us may have our own JRI-Poland related breakthrough, or the nachas of a parent or grandparents elated by something they never knew and that we shared with them. I hear so many, but for me, the most inspirational recent email was from Dahlia, a lady in Ontario who wrote to me, "I awoke at 4 a.m. unable to stop the images in my head. That's when I found your new message. Once again, I'm moved beyond words. From thinking myself a solitary leaf fluttering in the wind, I'm now picturing roots. Thank you from the bottom of my heart." To review, whether it's genealogy, academic, or historical research, DNA-inspired family reunions, identity searches, or discovery of the names of those who perished, named survivors could not bear to mention to their children, JRI-Poland is playing an invaluable role. That's why we need to emphasize that JRI-Poland is doing more than benefit you. Our mission is to contribute to our entire community, for whichever purpose our data is utilized. I would not be performing my responsibilities as Executive Director of JRI-Poland without expressions of gratitude to all those who have made our success possible. Our thanks start with our friends at Family Search, whose microfilms of Jewish records of Poland opened our eyes to the possibilities of a project like JRI-Poland. They extend to the leadership of the Polish State Archives, the men and women who over the years watched with admiration and encouragement as our database grew. We thank JewishGen for giving us a home for so many years until we moved to our own server last year in preparation for NextGen. And of course, we thank the organizations who enthusiastically shared their resources and allowed JRI-Poland to include their records in our database. The Jewish Historical Institute, the Foundation for Documentation of Jewish Cemeteries, the Joint Distribution Committee, to name just a few. And discussions are already underway to add more partners in the future. And most of all, we thank the research community for your encouragement and your continued financial support. I know that in one way or another, I've already mentioned support several times, but it is vital that I say once again, it is you, the researcher, who makes it all possible. Thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed seeing the NextGen story, but I'd like to give you a little bit more background. What prompted us to take on this massive task? Yes, we talked about what it will do, the difference it will make, but what was that moment in time when there was a realization that this had to happen? It happened probably about 7 years ago. Brian and his late mother were watching my computer screen through Skype, and they were watching all the different pieces of the puzzle that Brian talked about that go to make up the JRI-Poland story. The data, the towns, the status of the records, the outreach messages for town leaders to contact researchers. So many different pieces and parts. And Brian asked the question, how do you manage it all? And I said, I guess it's because it's in my DNA now. For the last 20 odd years at that point, now 25, this is what I did. And this is what I did and shared with so many other people. And this is not me alone. This is a group of us who have made that difference. But to give you an idea of just how many component parts there are, I think about the microfilm reader that my wife used 20 years ago to index the Jewish records of Quebec. And when she'd finished the project, the Jewish Public Library didn't want their old microfilm reader back. So we had to get it out of the basement in some way. But it was a monster. It had to be trucked in the first place, and 4 men had to move it into the basement. So my grandson and I spent a whole day taking it apart. And I'm not exaggerating when I said that this machine, built in Japan in the 50s, probably had 50,000 parts. And that is somewhat like the JRI-Poland story. Just think about it this way. For an average town, there's about 120 years of vital records, maybe 130 in some cases. There are 600 towns in Poland for which we have data. Multiply that, and you've got 72,000 years of records. And multiply that by 3 for births, marriages, and deaths, and you're up to 216,000 separate pieces of information about the status of records for each town. And we're not talking about the individual records per se, because there are 5 or 10,000 records of each type in some towns. We're getting into the millions now. And then think about knowing the status of the records for 1830 for Lublin. Were they scanned? Were they indexed? Were they partially extracted with more information? Were they fully extracted? Was the quality checked? And I say was the quality checked because something happened yesterday that really rings a bell for me. In our data, somehow it slipped in that it showed that the bride was deceased. That was a very interesting entry that I saw. But in actual fact, the bride's father was deceased. We want to make our data more accurate. And in order to do that, we have started a number of years ago called the Phase 3 Full Extraction Project. And we are going through all our data, town by town, year by year, and improving the quality of the data. And for many towns, of course, taking those basic indices and extracting the full record. Why is that critical mass of data, of full records with all the personal information that Brian illustrated? Because it enables you to climb your family tree in 5 or 10 minutes, maybe an hour, whereas in the old days, going through the microfilms, if you had microfilms for a town, it might have taken you weeks and months. And if you had to go to Poland and do research, you were probably talking about years. Years that have been collapsed down to 5 or 10 minutes. That in itself, to me, is almost a miracle. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what prompted us to make that important decision, that commitment to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to build the next generation system. And to be truthful, why we depend on each and every researcher to say to themselves, how can I help JRI-Poland accomplish this goal? The next generation is not an overnight success. There will be pieces and parts added as the years go by, as the months go by, as the weeks go by, because you, the researcher, is going to tell us, can you do that? Or why do you do that and not do it this way? Those of you who have been longtime researchers in JRI-Poland know that we've had changes over the years in the way we search. Just the fact that we now highlight the gubernia. If you may remember, going back about 6 years ago, you used to get all the search results in one screen. Then we became overwhelmed with data. So we divided it by gubernia. And that's another thing where there's a change. Gubernias are political boundaries, political units separated by boundaries. But sometimes adjoining gubernias have two towns that are really partners in the fact that the families of both towns were very, very much related. So there may have been a border, and you may have had your records in the Warsaw archives or the Warsaw area, and you may have had other records in the Pultusk area. We had to find a way of accommodating that. And so what we've done is change the archival area into what we call the research area. And that will help you as a researcher understand the relationship between the towns and your families, of course. Finally, I want to add one last thing, and then I'm certainly welcoming questions. Those of you who have posted questions. No organization can be successful without a sense of mission. Those of us who have been in business and other organizations know that unless we're all working together for that common good, for the common good and for the goal that we all share, it takes a little longer. We've been blessed with remarkable people on our team, the leadership and the next generation team leadership, to be able to continue to do what we do now and to continue to do it for the next 25 years and on. Thank you all very much for coming this evening, for attending, for listening, and I welcome your questions. Vicki?
Yep, we have quite a few questions and comments. I'll read you some comments first. Wonderful, Stanley. So good to hear and see Stanley. Wonderful programs always. A smiley face. Great to hear about what will be coming next for JRI-Poland and looking forward to the new website. There are a number of good questions as well. This one, first of all, is very technical, and I'm going to send it to Marilyn. Are you there? Our behind the scenes technician who is making all this possible, Marilyn Hayes. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, the question is, how long will the video of this presentation be up on YouTube?
From what I know, if you subscribe to our YouTube subscription, it should be there till we take it off. As long as we're on, it'll
Which
be
is,
on.
I
No, we
assume,
don't take them off.
months at least. At
1
least
month.
months, I would imagine, and possibly years. Okay, now to get to the meatier questions for Stanley. Um, the first one, how do you find out where your Jewish relatives came from?
Uh,
If
it's
you have all
funny.
night.
It's a funny question because in my lecture that I give called Jewish Family History, It's No Mystery, that's what I talk about is the challenge of where did they come from if they never gave you specifics. If they said from Poland, where did they come from? How do you use information to answer that question? Well, the first place to start, of course, is at home. We call it following the paper trail. In Montreal, in Canada, we have a vast collection of JIS records, the Jewish Immigrant Aid Society records. And we have to understand, of course, that so many people came, excuse me, came after the war. In many cases, they joined their relatives after the war. So you may not know where your grandfather came from, but if you find your grandfather's brother, you may be able to learn that way. There are naturalization records, passenger lists, there's all sorts of things. But if you're still stymied and you still don't know, how do you find out? Well, one of the ways, if the family came from Poland, is to use the JRI-Poland database and put in everything that you possibly know. For example, and we have this classic case from Bialystok from many years ago. It wasn't even a case of knowing where they were from. They didn't even know, the researcher in this case did not know the family's original name. That was a huge challenge. So this is what he did. He put in the given name of each. Oh, I'm sorry. I have to withdraw that. He became a qualified contributor to the Bialystok project. And with the full Excel file, the town leader was able to isolate all the different people with the name Harold. What did he do? He had to put Hersh and Aaron because those are the two logical Hebrew names. The An became Hannah, and then compared the search results by using the JRI-Poland name finder, which enables you to go through that whole Excel file and come up with the matches for all the different names. There were 5 children in this family, and 4 came up in where they all matched one surname, one family surname. And it's very logical. I don't even remember it. Let's say they changed the name to Dunn, so it was Ditkovsky. That is one of the ways in which the JRI-Poland database can help you find where they came from. Vicki.
Yeah, well, this is related. I think you've started answering it. Several people asked, people said their family changed their name when they came to Canada or the US. How do you figure out what their name was back in Poland?
Okay, well, we talked about it slightly.
Yes.
Obviously, I had the same kind of, not the same problem, and I shouldn't say obviously, because I knew growing up that my grandfather had changed the name from Archer to Diamond. Why he changed the name is another long story, and that's another lecture. But if you don't know, and I will give you an example. In doing my genetic research, I discovered the family in Poland by the name of Domocher that carried the genetic trait, because I found some Domachers, but there was a whole branch that was missing. And it wasn't until 3 years later that somebody somewhere in the DeMacher family said, oh, their name is Goldberg now. Why did Mr. DeMacher change his name to Goldberg? After he arrived, he wanted to, and was working, he wanted to honor his boss, the owner of the company, and he changed his name to the owner of the company. So they're all reasons why people change their names, many just to simplify the name. In my family, the Doms, D-O-M-B, became Duns. How do we find that out? Well, if you don't know, like I said, following the paper trail in your own home is important. In your own home country, or where they arrived. In the case of my family, my cousin, Avi Morowitz, did some research on his father many years ago, before the internet. And he managed to find the application, or the petition for naturalization for his father in New York. And what did it say? It said, I arrived in America with the name Reuben Hyatt. My name is now Reuben Morowitz. So the source of that information can be anywhere. We all say in genealogy, every record counts, every piece of paper counts. You may still not be successful in finding the original family name, particularly if your family came from a town where all the records were destroyed. You didn't even know the name of the town, but it could have been Stawisky. It could have been Sochachev in Poland. These are two towns for which none of the records survived, and you may be stuck. However, there are other sources, and we have been indexing other sources, notarial records, voter lists, remnants of information that we try to put together and see whether we can find or create some way of looking at the data from a town. And last but not least, the family finder and DNA. DNA has made miracles in helping people find who they are, where they're from. In the case of a lecture I gave last night on DNA, Cesare knew that his mother was a Jewish child. His family lived, as he knew that his mother had been handed by a Jewish family to his Polish grandparents in the railway station in Rozwadov. He did a DNA that revealed his Jewish ancestry after he heard it from his aunt. He got his mother to do a DNA. Remember, she was a Jewish child. And it turned out that the DNA matched so many people whose ancestry was along the San River in southeastern Poland all the way to the Ukraine. So it was obvious that that was the area, and very close to Rozwadov. So he had some indication, even though the Rozwadov records didn't survive. Over the next 10 years, he accumulated every piece of information relating to Rozwadov. If you put the name Rozwadov, the town name, in the JRI-Poland database, you will get hundreds of records from other towns referring to the place of birth for somebody from Rozwadov. And so he kept on building and building a database. At the end, it didn't work. But what worked was a DNA match that came up for a man in England who turned out to be a first cousin of his mother from the town of Zholinia, 65 kilometers away on the railway line. So she was handed over on the railway station according to what she had been told, and it made sense. So there's a number of different ways. And if I've given you any hints, I appreciate it, but I can tell you that other people will have other suggestions as well. Vicki?
Yeah. There's lots more questions, but first I have another one for Marilyn. Are you there? Marilyn? Ah,
I am here. I am here. Welcome
okay,
along.
good. Outstanding presentation. When will it be available for sharing? In other words, when will you post the final version on the YouTube channel?
It should be on tomorrow.
Okay, that's
Okay.
it.
And let me, I won't say caution people. Yes, share it with a friend, etc. Please do not post it on anything online anywhere. This is for individual viewing. Thank you. Vicki?
Yeah. Okay, the two people have asked about this. How do you provide family data to JRI-Poland? And here's an example. We have a record fully translated by an outside source. Is there a way to provide that translation to JRI-Poland or any other
Okay.
family records?
It's a question we get all the time. One of the important things that we have been doing is trying to be consistent in our data for each town. So if a professional is working on the RADM records, and we've had one professional working on the RADM records, translating the records that are in Russian from 1868 to 1915. We got another batch of records of the scans for RADM. I think it's 1917 and 18. But those are in Polish. And this expert on Russian who knows Polish geography and Polish spelling, and that without that, we would not be able to hire somebody who's Russian speaking. We don't hire people in Russia, for example, that would cost us a lot less because they don't know the Polish geography and they don't know the Polish spelling. So we don't get accurate information in our database. If the family name is what, if just as an example, if somebody's given name is Hana, the Russians would translate it Khana. In Polish, it's spelled Chana. That's just one example. So what do we do when somebody says, look, I've got 100 extracts? Unfortunately, at the present time, we can't use that data. To load one record at a time is laborious and not practical. And we have to look at it and examine it and make sure it fits within our criteria for the record. For example, some records people extract town. Is it the town of birth, the town of residence, the town of permanent residence? There are 3 different ways of looking at a town. We have to be very careful if we're going to be accurate in our data. So that's the reason why we can't use individuals' information. Vicki?
Okay. There are 2 related questions here. Will there only be information on Poland, or will there be records of the Ukraine and Belarus? And the other one was, of the 62 million records, how many are for people living in each of the adjacent countries?
Well, our mission is to index the records of Poland and adjoining Poland if the record sources are in Poland. So we have some towns from Lithuania. We have records for some towns in Belarus. The exception, of course, is with reference to Galicia, and it's not really an exception, it's because the Galician records are in Warsaw, in the AGAT archives, and the records that are still covered by Polish privacy, and when they're covered by Polish privacy, we do not put them online, period. And those records are in the Warsaw Civil Records Office, not because that's the place they should be, because it's the logical place to have them, given that the records will be transferred to the AGAT archives in Warsaw. And just a note about this whole question of confidentiality. We have been blessed over the years by being able to get access to information in many civil records offices that records that are still covered by Polish privacy. There are many unique circumstances why that happened. For genetic research, for looking for a bone marrow match, looking for a tissue match, and several other circumstances. So if you are a dedicated researcher and you want to know if there are records for JRI-Poland, in JRI-Poland, that are not online, you write to the town name, whatever town it is, at jripoland.org. It may take a while for you to get an answer, but it will end up with somebody who knows something about the status of additional records for that town. So as an example, if you had written our town leader for Woolwich about something, and you talked about your family in the 20th century living in Woolwich or Lodge, he would then be able to tell you that yesterday, JRI-Poland received the index to the 1936 to 1939 Lodge marriage and death records. Vicki.
Yeah. Is anything being done to check that the signatures in Yiddish match the information in Polish?
You know, that brings up a very interesting question. I talked before about the records of Quebec that my wife did the data entry of. In those records, the rabbis had a field day with spelling. The father would be spelled one way. The bride would be spelled another way. The bride would sign with a different spelling. This was not a unique circumstance. So the question is whether the Yiddish matches the Polish or the Russian. That has to be interpreted by the individual researcher. We can't do it all. It would be nice, but we can't do it all. And, you know, it's bad enough getting volunteers who do the data entry in Polish, but some of that Yiddish signatures are beyond our challenge, beyond our capability, I should say. Vicki.
How much is membership likely to be per year?
Okay. First, let's talk about why membership. There's a couple of reasons. First of all, we will shortly be inaugurating our own login. At the present time, you can get into JRI-Poland without logging in. And we're doing that both for security and to capture the email addresses of the vast community of people who research JRI-Poland for a very good reason. If we have 1,000 researchers who are interested in Lodge, we would be able to immediately tell them that we have the 1936 to 1939 records. They're not online yet, they're delayed, but if you need those records, we can serve you, we can help you. Another reason for having the registration, the login and registration, is to be able to send out mass mailings of a general nature. Then let's talk about membership. Until 3 years ago, I could proudly say that 93% of all funds raised, the $2.5 million raised, up that time it was probably 2.2 million, went to the creation of data. However, we had been blessed with a treasurer, Sheila Sallow, a volunteer for 22 years. But our organization grew, the job grew, the intensity of the job grew. The questions that had to be answered were more frequent. And when Sheila retired, we had to hire a paid individual to handle JRI-Poland's accounting function. Our administrative costs have gone up. We now have our own server. We are on our own server. We have other kinds of costs, and they add up. A little bit of software here, a little bit of personal. You know, when we send masses of scans to somebody and they have a limit on what their download is, we will compensate them. So how are we going to assure JRI-Poland of a constant flow of dollars to offset the cost of administration? Keep in mind that almost all contributions to JRI-Poland are shtetl-based. People donate for the data for their town. They support their town. But when it comes to supporting the whole JRI-Poland structure, that presents a problem for us. And that is what the membership fee is going to be. Tentatively speaking, I can tell you it's going to be $54. It's not cast in stone, but we think it's a reasonable one. It's less than Litvak SIG and Galicia SIG, Gesher Galicia charge for membership. The question then comes up, what are the additional benefits for being a member? We're working on a number of different possibilities, keeping in mind that our contract with the Polish State Archives says that our data must be available free online at all times after it has been funded. That is, we're not compelled to put up data that we have spent $5,000 to create unless we've collected that $5,000. So that's the story of membership in a brief summary. Vicki?
I think that's it for questions. There's just one more comment that's a good one to end on. Excellent presentation. Looking forward to the innovated JRI website. Looks great as per the video. Thank you, Stanley and Brian, for all your dedication. And that's it from our audience tonight. And okay. I have to echo that. Thank you, Stanley. It was fascinating and the site looks fabulous.
Dziękuję bardzo, which is thank you very much in Polish. I want to end on another note, and that is I've gotten to know so many wonderful people over these many years. From the first conference I went to at the World Trade Center in New York in 1992. It has given me such a joy to be on this journey in my retirement years. Every morning when I wake up, I know that there's going to be something in the way of an email, far too many emails, and many of you know that, but with a comment, a joy shared with us with me and with other members of our leadership because somebody has made a breakthrough. I get stories of breakthroughs virtually every day. And that is what drives me and it drives all my colleagues into do what we do. And we do it not with being a hammer over our head. It's because we enjoy it. We get great nachas from the feedback. And as we say in French, schäm sich nicht. If you've got a great story to share with us, please do that. We are going to have on our new website a rolling screen of quotes from people for whom we made a difference. And that one that was in the video, this lady who wrote, I felt like a leaf blowing in the wind, that will be there as well. We want to hear your stories as well. Thank you all very much. Good night. God bless. Stay safe. And we'll see you soon.